Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Take two. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Good morning.
Much more energy in your voice, and when you give your voice energy, you actually become more creative, coincidental, and we'll talk about that later.
That's your gadget.
Thank you.
All right.
So first of all, a few questions. How many of you primarily do hand-drawn mind maps? Okay. How many of you use some kind of software? Okay. How many of you are daydreamers? Excellent. How many of you are not particularly creative? Okay. How many of you are averagely creative? Okay. How many of you are scientists? 9. How many of you are artists?
Do you mean artists in the broad sense, creative arts?
Artist. I'll refine that one and we'll say how many of you are artists in the sense of those who can draw and paint. Okay, so again, that's about 15 of you. How many of you are poets? 11. How many of you are not scientists? Vast majority. How many of you are not artists? And how many of you are not poets? Okay. How many of you have children? Okay. Then let's talk about today creativity. What actually is creativity? What is the potential of your brain? And I will relate it to you, obviously, to your family, to your community, to the planet in general. And we'll have a 10-minute session at the end for answers and questions, or questions and answers in that order. I will also be here for the lunch period from about 12:30-ish to 1:25, and then I'll be back at around 4:25 for the cocktail party in the evening, and I'll be available for you as much as possible then. So today, this of course is a mind map. How many of you like colors? Keep your hands up. Look around. Everybody. Don't like.
I don't relate to colours very well, so I don't use colours much for signalling in school.
Do you use them at all?
When I paint a house.
With colour?
But otherwise, no, I'm not a big user of colour.
Okay, and if you see flowers particularly...
Yellow. Yellow flowers, then I can relate to it. The rest of it, I don't really see.
Okay, so yellow flowers, yeah. So a little bit of like. Okay, so let's now then investigate our past and look at the present and obviously the future. How many of you took notes in your school? Okay. What color primarily did you use? Yeah, black, blue, blue, blue. How many of you dominantly blue or black? Okay. That is global. I'm on to my 74th country this year, and every country has educational systems that teach note-taking in blue or black. And that includes China, Japan, all the Asian countries, New Zealand, Australia, Germany, Italia, Russia, the Gulf, Latin America, America, etc. And obviously UK. So blue and black. So let's examine it. Let's examine it. If you take blue or black and you think about it as a wavelength, for the brain, it is fundamentally a monochrome, a single color. And for the brain, that is a monotone, a monotonous. And if it is monotonous, what's the word that you get? Monotonous. And if something is monotonous, really monotonous, what word do we use to describe it? And you all knew it. So every brain knew it. Boring. Next question. What happens to your brain when it is bored? Switching off. Tuning out. Shutting down. Going to sleep. So the note-taking technique designed around the world for centuries is unwittingly designed to tune out, switch off, shut down, send to sleep all the brains on the planet. Think about it. And that's what started me into the development, the growth, the invention of mind maps. Because I was bored, and I was at university, and I was doing worse and worse every semester. And eventually I went to the library and I said, look, I need a book on how to use my brain. And the librarian said, medical books are over there. And I said, I don't want medical books. I don't want to take my brain out. I want to learn how to use it. And she said, oh, there are no books on that. And I thought, how amazing. If you go into a shop and you buy any little machine, a watch, a washing machine, what do you get with it? A manual. And for this most important machine on the planet, no operations manual. So that's when I began to explore it. And that eventually evolved into the mind map for reasons that you will discover. So let us explore then your own note-taking, our own thinking, and particularly a focus on creativity. I'd like you to do 2 creativity tests. First one, creativity 1. So take a little pad or whatever notepaper you have. Creativity test 1. And I want you to do this individually. So in creativity test 1, in any language you like, as fast as you can, jot down every single use, every possible use you can think of for a paperclip, starting now. Okay, group, stop. Add up your total. Mark your most brilliant, your most creative of those ideas. And then write down creativity test number 2. Almost identical little test. And in this one, write down as fast as you can, any language you like, every possible non-use for every paperclip. So every possible non-use, starting now. Everything for which you cannot in any way use a paperclip. Okay, again, stop. Same procedure. Tot up your score. Mark your best one, your most brilliant, most creative use. And then on your tables, quick exchange. First of all, talk about the uses. And tell the people your uses and your best one and why it's your best one. And when you've done the uses, transfer, obviously again, to the non-uses and your best one and why it was your best one as well. Starting now. Ladies and gentlemen, let us examine the global scores so you can compare and contrast yourself. Here is a standard distribution graph of the global scores. They range from 0 to 8, which are the normal range scores, 9 to 12, very good. Obviously, 13 to 15, excellent. Einsteinian, 16 or more. So let's check. Test number 1, the uses for a paper. How many of you score between 0 and 8, inclusive? Okay. Anybody 9 to 12? Very good. 13 to 15? Okay. Excellence in absentia. And 16 or more? Okay. So a good average group with a slight push towards above average. Test number 2. How many of you scored 0 to 8? The non-use, the negative test. Okay. How many of you scored between 9 and 12? Test number 2. Very good. 13 to 15? Quite a few of you. And 16 or more? Well done. All right. More serious question. How many of you in test number 2, the non-uses, got a lower score? Okay. How many of you got the same score? And how many of you got a higher score in test number 2? Okay, as you see, a vast majority. Which leads us, at this early juncture of our time together, to an unhappy conclusion. Because this is obviously a negative thinking group. So the question is, why would anybody get a higher score, or a lower score, or a higher score, obviously, in test number 2? Because a higher score, and that's most of you, a higher score for the non-uses, why? Why would people get a higher score in test number 2? Right. The phrase there is, there are no boundaries to the non-uses. Theoretically, how many possible non-uses for a paperclip?
Endless.
Infinite, infinite, infinite. How many of you agree that theoretically the possible number of non-uses is infinite? Okay, so again, that's in a sense virtually a unanimous decision, the non-uses. So already you're now in a very difficult thinking swamp. And first of all, let me explain. If we think we have to find the correct formula to think well, and if we think poorly, then obviously it's an incorrect formula. And let me metaphorize that. Imagine that you're an Olympic athlete. You're muscularly fit, you are flexible, you are cardiovascularly very fit, and you sink in a swamp. And you're beginning to go down. And you think, I am Olympian, appropriate name for this particular location. And I'm thinking I'm Olympian, so what I will do obviously is use my Olympian energy to get out. What will happen? You will sink, and you will sink how? Faster. And therein, as Shakespeare says, lies, or therein lies the rub. In other words, there's the essence of the problem. Because when you are Olympian and you get the wrong formula, you sink faster. So think about the implications. It means that the more intelligent you are, the more educated you are, the more focused you are, the more persistent you are, the more kind you are, the more loving you are, the more wonderful you are, all those wonderful things, the faster you go down. If you apply the incorrect formula. So, in the non-uses for a paperclip, already sinking. Because, obviously, it's an easier test. But at least about 20 of you got a lower score in the easier test. So what was the matter with those 25 people? Were they suffering from creativity test burnout a few minutes ago? So we have to explore it. We've got to get out of the swamp. We've got to find the correct formula in terms of creativity. So let us now then look at the non-uses. And we'll imagine, and let's, again with your creativity, always play imagination games. Einstein said you should always do that. Play imagination games. So I want you to imagine that this is an Oxonian debating chamber. And you're going to invite the top debating people around the planet to debate on the non-uses. And what we'll do is we'll take your best non-uses and then we'll discuss them. So give me first of all 3 of your really best non-uses for a paperclip.
Food.
Food. You cannot in any way use paperclip as food. You were next.
Means of transport.
You cannot in any way use it as a means of transport. So food, means of transport. Someone at the back. Can't live in it. Okay? So food, transport, can't live in it. So I want you now to imagine that you've invited the top debaters around the planet and you've given them the easy case. All they have to debate and defend is that you can't. You can't use it as food, can't use it as transport, can't live in it. You have to take the opposite side and say you can. So on your table, see if you can find can for those 3. Starting now. Okay, group. What we are going to do here, we're going to find the formula. We're going to hunt for the formula. We want to get the 120 of you in here, so we want to go to 120 for cannot, because then we will find the thing or things for which you cannot use a paperclip. Then you will have a laser insight into your own brain and your potential and your creativity. So, first, how many of you vote that you cannot in any way use a paperclip as food? Two, how many of you say you cannot? How many of you say you can use it as food? Okay, so it's 2 to 118. And we're looking for 120 zeros. So not a significant or an imposing beginning. Number 2, you cannot in any way use a paperclip as transport. How many vote that you cannot in any way use a paperclip as transport? 0. How many of you say you can? Okay, so it's 0, 120. Perfect number in exactly the opposite of what we want. Number 3. This could be the end of this session.
Right, okay. I'll wrap up now.
You cannot in any way live in a paperclip. How many of you agree that you cannot in any way live in a paperclip? 0 again. And how many say you can? Okay, group. First of all, then, let me just quickly ask you, how can you use a paperclip as food? You, lady, you had the first one?
Because it's magnetic, it must have iron in there. Therefore, you can put some iron into it as an iron supplement.
Ah, so if it's an iron metal paperclip, and you're suffering from anemia, then you can eat your paperclip in kind of ground on your cereals or porridge, whatever it is, and use it as a dietary supplement. Yes.
Nobody quantified what the molecular makeup of that paperclip was. I think everybody assumed that it was going to be metal. A paperclip is just an object for clipping paper. We discussed it could be a pretzel as a paperclip, just in another tool.
Did you all hear that? There is no chemical construct in the paperclip question, and therefore it could be made of anything. And it could be made into a pretzel, it could be candy, spaghetti, whatever it is. Okay, group, so you are thrashing this debate and thrashing yourselves. And we've got these infinite number of non-uses, and we haven't found one. And we need to find one. We need to resolve the situation to make sure that you have the formula for the correct formula for your thinking, your creativity, the development of your intelligences. So incubate it, put it in, think about it, and we'll come back to it later. But we want to find a non-use. So what we'll do next is, again, look at the potential of your brain and how you use it. And we'll come back to the paperclip a little bit later. So, memory, learning, and creativity. What percentage, what current use, what percentage do we use of our brains? Roughly. And I mean here in kind of daily activity, when you're learning, studying at school, whatever it happens to be. 2 or 3%, 10%? Roughly? 30%? How many of you think between 20 and 30%? How many of you think 10 to 20%? Okay. Memory, learning, and creativity, the average. The average. How many of you say 1 to 10? Okay, so most of you are pretty low. And I'm pleased to say that you are actually optimistic. Less than 1% in these areas. And easily demonstrable. Easily demonstrable. Bad news or good news? Okay, so we got some, it's almost like the House of Commons murmuring, isn't it? How many say good news? How many say bad news? It could be bad news, but it's really good news. Why is it good news? Because you got plus 99% to access. To access. And we have been trained, I assure you, globally, on average and dominantly, to be suppressed, to be reduced in these areas. And boring notes is one incorrect formula. And there are many others which we are about to explore.
So in a primitive society, you would say they use...
Sorry?
In a primitive society, there is examples where they use more if you say that they're trained not to use it.
Yes.
So in a...
Many primitive societies, I mean, you can go into any continent. You will find, for example, the earlier Eskimos, all the North and South American Indian/Aboriginals, the Australian Aboriginals, the original Europeans, using a lot of their brains.
And a child, a young child.
And children we are coming to momentarily. So it is good news. And let me just give you one example. On creativity, we're going to do that at the end of this session. But in terms of memory, let me give you a London University 1993 research, which was announced in 1994 at about the third World Memory Championships. What they discovered was that there are limits to memory, and that there are certain Everests that will never be scaled. And one of these was the ability to remember spoken digit numbers. And the normal limit was around 7, 10 maximum, and nobody would ever, in the future of history, be able to remember 30 or more. Do you want to know whether that's true or not? Let me test you. This will be the experiment done in London University. I'll be the professor, you are the student, and I'm just going to ask you to remember what I speak. Don't write them down. This is not a writing test. This is just check how much you can remember. Are we ready? First number, 3, 5. Okay, that's it. Anybody remember that? 2 digits. And you all laugh. It's laughably easy. Ridiculously easy. Discarded. Next number. 5, 8, 2, 9, 4. Okay, that's that number. How many can remember that? Okay. Easy or difficult? Yeah. And people are saying, well, you know, kind of easy-ish. Easy-ish. 5 digits. Discard. Next number. 7, 3, 2, 8, 9, 1, 0. Okay, that's that number. How many can remember that? Okay. Easy or difficult? Difficult. That was only 7. 7. And that's the point where most memories begin to fracture. So now you realize why they said 30 will never be possible. Because is that difficulty even rising, or is it exponential? Exponential. So think about 30. Impossible. As you are about to discover. Really try, discard the others, really try to remember this coming one. Hard as you can. Starting now. 7, 0, 9, 6, 0, 4, 1, 6, 2, 8, 4, 7, 5. How many can remember that? 0. And that was only 13. A lucky number. And many of you at 10 were already smiling or laughing. You go, oh, what's the point? So already 10 laughably difficult, 30 impossible. In the last couple of years, in the World Memory Championships, in the spoken memory competition, the digits are spoken twice as fast as I gave them to you, and 3 competitors in the competition scored perfectly 100 spoken digits. 100. Perfect. And the winner memorized 202 digits spoken. Unbelievably, astronomically impossible. And he did it in the morning. And there were 3 other memory competitions during the day. Then there was a champagne kind of cocktail party and a dinner. And at the end of the dinner, some mean-spirited individual said, Gunther, can you recall that spoken number? And to everyone's amazement, he said, yeah, hold on, let me just try. Started slowly, accelerated, and did 202 again. After 10 hours, 3 more competitions, 5 glasses of champagne, perfect. And when he finished it, he said, would you like me to do it again? Backwards. And he did. Perfectly. The potential of the human brain, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of times greater than what is standardly trained and what is, quote unquote, available. So using less than 1%, wonderful news. And it's probably 0.00001%. So the gold mine and the gold mined is even better. So let us examine, how do we access this? How do we mine it? So let us look at the way that I am working at the moment with you. What do you think my prime language is? English? Tell me, because many of you come from different countries, tell me what your prime first language is. I can't say it. My prime language is? Okay, so a range of different spoken languages. And I'm going to say no and no. So let's examine it. I'm going to ask you to, again, play an imagination game. Imagine that you're a computer. And I'm going to give you a piece of data, and I want you to access it, and then I want you to check it, self-examine. In other words, what actually does the brain give me? How long did it take me to get? Are there any colors, associations, connections to whatever the brain gives me? So I'll give you the data, check it. How long, what, and what kind of associations, if any. Are you ready? Piece of data I want you to access is coconut. Play with it. How did you get it? How long? What did your brain give you? Okay, now let everybody else know what happened in your head. Explain it, compare it. Starting now. What happened? Okay, group. So we are now in the age of intelligence. So in the context of that, how long did it take you to access it? Instantaneous, immediate, like that. Think about that. And everybody around the world has said it for decades. Immediate, nanosecond, microsecond. Your database is virtually infinite. You never heard this stimulation before, and you get it just like that. Impossible. How did your brain do that? No scientist can yet explain. We know the fundamental process of connection, etc. But not, how did you get it? How did you get it? And if you can explain it, then you will get a Nobel Prize. And you will get it just like that. Because it's that magical. Do search for it. How many of you then got a nice little printout saying COCONU How many of you got that? What did you get? A picture. How many of you got a picture or an image? Everybody. Put those hands up again. Now look around. Everybody. Everybody. How many of you had associations, multisensory associations, any colors? Ladies and gentlemen. An image. That's what you got. That could have been mummy, that could have been a coconut. That could have been E equals MC squared. Could have been your toe. Could have been anything. And radiating from it, boom. Image and associations. Imagination and associations. That's what your brain gives you. And that's what every child, every nation, every sex, every race, every religion, every human being, that's how the brain works. The human language. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the human language. And English, or Incan, or Mandarin, or back to Australian Aboriginal. It's the same, isn't it? It's the same. If I say to you, Pingor, what happens in your head? Pingor. Hello, or ping pong, or Tony's gone a little bit wonky. If I say to you, manzana, same. But if I say to you, apple, same thing. Pingor is Mandarin for apple. Manzana is apple. So the language is not primary. Those spoken languages are not primary. They are secondary. They're a very, very significant and important sub-routine. That is the prime language. Now, how far on can your associations travel? How far can they go? As far as your imagination. How far? Infinite. Infinite. And that is one of the main theories that drove me and drew me into mind mapping. Because that's how the mind map actually works. Mind maps are simply an image in the center, not words. You know, some people think that it's a mind map with words in the middle and a nice circle. Why not? Why not? Yeah. Because a picture is worth 1,000 words. So with your thinking and with your creativity, don't put it in words. Put it in image. Occasionally find a really good keyword which is almost imagistic in itself. Metaphoric, if you like. So, if you look at the mind map, that's how a mind map works, isn't it? So please do think of mind maps as a meta language for the human race, which can go on and on and on. Can you put Mandarin in here? Can you put Vietnamese in here? Can you put Bulgarian in here? Can you put any language here? Of course. So the mind map embraces all of those second subroutine. So your capacity to think creatively is infinite. The number of solutions you can find is how many? Infinite. Once you realize that, and you will never meet any foreigners. There are no foreigners. They all speak the same language. And children do it, don't they? You go and say you go on a holiday, and you will hear sometimes parents saying to their 4 or 5-year-old children, don't go and play with them because they don't speak our language. Within 2 minutes, what do those children do? Go and play. And within 5 minutes, they've got a new best friend because they speak the same language. And in their little brains, they know what the sunshine is. They know what a dog is. They know what the grass is. They know what the yellow flowers are. They know billions of things, which is why they can communicate. And then occasionally they put in a few blah, 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 which helps. So, creativity is infinite. Yeah? So, how are you going to release this? How are you going to be truly creative and have a truly fabulous memory? Let's now examine what you are and what you're not. Bulk of you, the majority, not scientists. What's a scientist? You must know what a scientist is because you know you're not one. A scientist is somebody who studies the sciences. And it's a person in a kind of white lab coat and kind of nerdish in a stinking and dangerous laboratory. Not at all. A scientist is a person who simply follows a scientific method, which is have an hypothesis. How many of you have all studied some kind of science? Right. So you've all done that. So you know the scientific method. Hypothesis, experiment, result, conclusion. That's a scientist. And you're not one. But let's look at a baby. May I have a piece of paper? I'm not going to give it back. Yeah, just one sheet. Thanks. So I'm a baby. You give me this. Am I going to give it back to you like that? No. This is what a baby, every baby in the world does. And in the literature it says that the human being is naturally aggressive and destructive. And yet this is perfect science, isn't it? Brilliant scientist. New material. What's the tensile, mechanical, engineering strength of it? What's the potential for musical instrument? What's the sociological, economic value? Anybody want some? Stick it in the billion-faceted chemical laboratory. Musical instruments. And then try what? The next experiment. Every baby is a beautiful, perfect scientist. How many of you were babies? So once upon a time you were scientists and now you're not. Children are children scientists. 4 or 5-year-old children walking by with mummy, daddy, and there's a big puddle and some stones, small and big. What do the children do? Hypothesis. Little stone will make a little splash. Plunk. Correct. Bigger stone makes a bigger splash. Poof. Correct. Third hypothesis. I'm bigger than that big rock. Wham! All over mummy and daddy. Fascinating experiment. How many of you were children? Ladies and gentlemen, how many of you are scientists? And how many of you play around with your food? Of course. So you're a scientist, which means you are curious, you explore, you take risks, you manage, you get into the kind of necessity obliges invention, doesn't it? So you're a scientist, which means automatically, rather than thinking you're not, you release all that energy, all that curiosity, all that association, all that metaphorical thinking, all that excitement, all that childlikeness. How many of you have ever doodled or done some kind of little sketchy something? So you've all done pictures. And you said you weren't artists. But if you're drawing pictures, doesn't matter how good they are, you're an artist. And once you're an artist and a scientist, you will then explore. So again, you unleash all your multiple intelligences. Most of you are not poets. How many of you have written, your first little poem to your first little boyfriend, girlfriend, your first little animal, your mummy, daddy, your uncle, your sadness, your happiness? How many of you have written a little poem? So basically everyone. Anybody written more than one? So how can you say, oh, by the way, yes, I do write poetry, but I'm not a poet. Of course you're a poet. Once you take those steps, you are then on the journey. And poetry is the queen jelly of metaphorical thinking. And Aristotle said metaphorical thinking is the highest level of thinking. How many of you are poets? So imagine the world in which 99% of the people in the world thought, we're not scientists, we're not artists, we're not poets. What kind of future is that planet going to have? Not very intelligent. But imagine now the planet with scientists, poets, artists, childlike minded individuals. What kind of future is that planet going to have? Innovative, creative, positive, utopian. And you are the messengers for that. You are the warriors of the mind. For your children, for all the children, and for everybody. So I think you're a bunch of geniuses. And it's really nice to have spent an hour, or nearly an hour, with scientists, artists, poets, childlike people, individuals who give the planet good hope. Thank you. It's wonderful being with such a group of poets, artists, scientists, and genii. And I got to Couple of questions.
Thank you. I'm sure you will agree that was stimulating to the nth degree. We've got just 2 or 3 minutes left, so if there are any burning questions that you'd like to put to Tony, I'm sure he'd be very happy to answer. We've got a mic at the back there, if you want to put your hands up. Catherine can come and find you.
Yeah, I can get you here.
Just had a really interesting session about the future of technology, learning. Quite a lot in there about this avalanche of information that's there now. We're swimming in it. What do you feel about the way we're swimming in this information, our drowning even, and the impact that has on our abilities to create our creativity?
It's set up there, the intelligence age. Everybody thinks, both political, business, educational, that we are in the information age. We are not. The information age gives us wonderful gifts, but it also gives us information overload. And therefore, we end up with death by PowerPoint. We're overwhelmed. We have people saying that tweets and social media, etc., are drowning everybody, which they can. But the real question is a hand good or bad? Is a hand good or bad? Depends on how you use it. Same with the social networks and the information. We're not in the information age. We're in the intelligent age, where we can be intelligent and use these things intelligently. I have just started using, for example, Tweet, and I actually really enjoy it. And I've started to make some rules for myself and my colleagues that tweets are really good if you send tweets which are positive, upbeat, informational, help people direct their own lives towards a positive goal in their own self-development, and lacing with poetry, or little kind of haiku-like. And so if ever you send me a tweet, and in fact, ta-da, we had one this morning, and I retweeted it. So anything you send me that I think is really good, it's about mind map brain learning, whatever it is, I'll retweet it and pass it on. And also on things like YouTube, TEDx. I haven't done anything on that, but I've now started to do that. And I've just gone with TEDx, and it's really useful. Rather than me speaking to smaller groups, I can speak to thousands or tens of thousands or millions, saying, hey, you've got a good brain. So I think that there's no real problem with it. It's simply a matter of finding solutions. And the number of solutions we can find, you actually know the answer. Your graduation moment from this particular session is the paperclip. You failed miserably. You didn't find one non-use from an infinite universe that you agreed. So what actually has your group brain now realized? How many non-uses for a paperclip are there? None. Because how many possible uses are there? Infinite. And your brain knew it. It's why when anybody said, you can't use a paperclip for this, you always said, yes, you could, you could. You'll always find a way. So your capacity to think positively and find solutions is infinite. So address that. And I'll leave you with the mini story. A little girl, 7 years old, put that all in one capsule. She was in a large group debating it, and it was a 4-day course. And one father had said, there's one thing you cannot use a paperclip for. And everybody said, what? And this little girl said, what? And he said, you cannot in any way fly to the moon on a paperclip. And the 7-year-old girl immediately, yes, you can. And he got furious. He said, what? And she said, it's very easy. She said, you go onto your spaceship, you take your paperclip, You put it on the seat, you sit in your seat, and you fly to the moon on a paperclip. Thank you. Infinite creativity. See you at lunch, see you in the afternoon.